I am honored to welcome you all to our first ever Global Summit on People-Centered Clean Energy Transition. We are, at the IEA, we are honored that so many of you came, different parts of the world, especially those colleagues and friends traveling from Africa, from Latin America, North America, Asia, and of course, always from Europe. Your efforts, your willingness to attend this meeting is much appreciated. Dear colleagues, I wanted to also welcome our special guest, a very special guest, the Mayor of Paris, Madame Anne Hidalgo. It's a great honor, Madame Mayor, to welcome you here. I guess the first time at the IEA headquarters, but I hope not the last time. But thank you very much for that. Dear colleagues, this meeting, bringing governments, labor, civil society, youth, and industry is unique. This gathering is happening for the first time in the energy world. And we are, as International Energy Agency, we are very happy to make this happen and having the first ever global summit on people-centered clean energy transition. If I may, let me tell you why we thought such an initiative is needed. To do that, I have to tell you a few things about the energy world. First of all, I should tell you that energy, our profession, is a good thing. Energy makes our life easier, more comfortable, more productive. Without energy, not much goes on. But today, the energy world around the world is dominated by use of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels give us energy, but it at the same time creates a major problem for all of us around the world, which is climate change. About 80% of the emissions causing climate change today comes from using coal, oil, and gas in an excessive manner since years. So, therefore, many countries, many governments, utilities, they are all keen to push clean energy since a long time. In fact, one of the milestones of the clean energy has started in Paris, 2015, when we have the Paris, landmark Paris Climate Agreement. Now, when we look at the numbers today, which we do at the IEA every single minute, I should say, clean energy transition is moving fast and faster than many people realize. Let me give you at least two numbers, which is based on our two reports came out in the last few days. One of them is about electric cars. I know how passionate Madame Mayor is, electrification of the Paris transportation sector. Electric cars. Electric cars are moving very fast in the transportation sector. 3 years ago, 1 out of 25 cars sold in the world was electric. So 1 out of 25 3 years ago. And this year, we expect more than 1 out of 5 cars sold is electric, growing very strongly. And in many countries, electric cars are becoming cost competitive vis-a-vis the traditional cars, internal combustion engine cars. So we see the electrification of transportation sector for climate environmental reasons, but also happening as a technology develops there. The second one, another important area of emissions, how we generate electricity, how we produce electricity. Again, according to our numbers, last year, more than 85% of power plants, electricity plants built in the world were renewables. More than 85% renewables. Huge growth. And when we look at the next 3 years, all the growth in the electricity consumption in the world will be met by renewables alone. A big growth coming from there. So these are definitely good things, and this is going to accelerate, and I can give you many examples. But the issue is, the message is, clean energy transition is moving fast. Now, this is good news, but we also feel that in the energy world, moving from the existing energy system to move to a new, cleaner energy system requires a lot of efforts. And there are costs of moving from the old one to the new one. And we are afraid that the cost or the burden of the change might be disproportionately fall on the shoulders of the low and mid-income people. So this is our worry. This, in turn, first of all, it is not fair. And the second, this, in turn, may lead not to have the public support behind the clean energy transition, which is essential. Because we want a clean energy future for the people, for everybody, not for the elite. So this is the reason we thought it is important to have a dialogue with all walks of the society, to hear from them, and it is a critical issue for the IEA. For us, the clean energy transition we all talk about, there is one word, a magic word, at least for me: equity. Equity is very important. Equity between the countries, equity within the countries, equity between the genders, and among the communities. So this is for us essential, and it is the reason we are building, having this group here today. Now, my colleague Brian Motherway tells me, and he reported this morning, that today we have all the relevant key constituencies with us: governments, labor, youth, indigenous communities, business, and different civil society perspectives. I want to have one remark on the trade unions, because I get the question, why the IEA invites the trade unions. We had a special meeting yesterday with the labor representatives, because we work with the governments. We are a government organization. We work with the energy industry, which is very normal, with the business executives. And not to have a dialogue with the labor is not, first of all, fair, and the second, it will not bring us to a good outcome, successful clean energy transition. So today, I am very happy that the trade unions around this table represent more than 200 million workers around the world, from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia, and elsewhere. So this is an area that we are very happy, and I am thankful to our Labour Council leaders, Sharan, Burrow, thank you very much, Sharan, and President Lossi sitting just next to me. Dear colleagues, about the IEA and the IES, how we look at the energy transition in terms of the global picture and in terms of being an organization which pays attention to equity, I want to give you 3 examples, the jobs we are doing. One of them, some of you know, I feel very passionate about, is the clean cooking in Africa. So, dear colleagues, according to our analysis today, in sub-Saharan Africa, 4 out of 5 families use wood, agricultural waste, animal waste for cooking the through primitive stoves. And it is almost exclusively women who prepare the meal and go and fetch the wood from the forest and prepare the meal. And the fumes, the toxic material coming from the cooking is a major problem for the respiratory diseases for women. And the data shows very clearly that this respiratory diseases caused by the primitive cooking practices is one of the 2 reasons for premature death for women in Africa. So one of the 2 premature reasons for premature death in Africa. And every year, more than 500,000 women die prematurely because of this issue. And we are in 21st century and using wood for cooking, and 500,000 women die. This is an energy issue, but not only energy, it's an equity issue, it's a gender issue, it's a health issue. So we thought, as IEA, we make the analysis, we put the numbers, how to solve it, how much does it cost, but we thought it is now time to change this picture, which is not, in fact, within the means of everybody. So we are, on 14th of May, we are holding a major summit on clean cooking in Africa, co-chaired by the Prime Minister of Norway, Prime Minister Støre, President of Tanzania, Madam Hassan, the President of African Development Bank, Mr. Adesina, and myself, and we are having a lot of presidents and prime ministers, ministers from Africa, from the rest of the world, the investors, energy industry coming all here. And, dear colleagues, we asked the energy industry, governments to pledge money put on the table that we can solve this problem. And I am very happy to see that we have still a few weeks to our summit. We are very happy to see that there is a significant amount of financial commitments coming from different countries and companies and others. And we will discuss this, how to make the use of it to address this problem for once and forever. I can assure you that this meeting will be a turning point in addressing this issue in Africa. And my also thanks to French government that the President Macron is going to organize a reception for the leaders coming from the world at the, for our summit here. The second point about the IEA and in this context to show our sensitivity for these issues is some of the clean energy programs, plans, policies are not well designed to protect the lower and mid-income people from the changes. This is not because of intention, many times because of not being well designed. So it is the reason we are coming up with a report very soon in end of May, how to make the clean energy transition more affordable. Because in addition to energy policies, you may need some additional fiscal, economic, social policies to support the vulnerable parts of the community. We will come up with these suggestions because we are afraid that if the policies are not well designed, it provides also a fertile ground for some people to say that the clean energy is bad for the poor. which is exactly the opposite, but we do not want to give this ammunition to them. It is the reason we want to make sure that the clean energy policies are good for everybody. So this is the report that we are coming right before the elections in some parts of the world. The third and the final issue I wanted to mention, we are, at the end of this meeting, there will be a chair summary I will put together and share with all of you. In a few days we will send to you. But we are also going to build a commission, a global commission, a people-centered transition global commission, which is going to be chaired by the Minister of Energy of Brazil, Minister Silveira. And we will have the representatives of government, civil society, labor, energy industry, and the works of this this commission and this meeting will be an input for the G20 in Brazil. I was a few weeks ago. I was in Brasilia. I mentioned to you also, Madam Mayor. I had a meeting with the President Lula, and he underlined, he made sure and reassured me that the just and clean energy transition will be at the heart of the Brazilian G20, and the output of this meeting and the works of our commission will provide input to G20 in Brazil, and our colleagues from Brazil throughout the day will tell you more about that. So, dear colleagues, I wanted to finish by telling you all that this is a very important meeting for us, for the International Energy Agency, but I think also for the entire energy world. This is a first, but I believe at the IEA we were first in many areas, and we hope that this initiative will provide the inspiration for the governments, for the industry leaders and others. We hope so, but even if it is not the case, we will be very stubborn to make sure that the clean energy transition will be a just and equitable one. IEA will follow this. To discuss these issues in our first session, we have very important speakers, I should say, from different parts of the world and with different perspectives. And the first one is, I mentioned to you, our special guest, the Madame Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris. We at the IEA, we are in Paris, we live in Paris, and I can tell you that, Madame Mayor, we are big fans of yours. Whatever you are doing in Paris, how you are dealing with this clean energy and sustainability issue is really an example for all of us. And dear colleagues, I am thankful to Madame Mayor. Not only she is here, she will tell us a few words, but she's also going to host us, give us a reception this afternoon in one of the most beautiful buildings of Paris, Hôtel de Ville. And thank you very much, Madame Mayor. So, over to you, Madame Mayor. Je pense vous parler en français.
Oui, merci. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You have the request. You have your earphones here that you can follow the Madame Mayor's speech. Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Merci à vous. Welcome to Paris, the city of love. Bienvenido en París a todos los compañeros de también el mundo hispánico y del mundo entero. I will speak in French in my city, and I'm also I share the network of Francophone mayors around the world, and I will speak in French. Bienvenue, vraiment. Merci beaucoup. D'abord, merci beaucoup à vous, Monsieur le Directeur Exécutif, cher Fatih Birol, parce que oui, cette réunion est historique. Et je crois qu'elle va marquer une étape fondamentale dans ce travail que nous devons faire pour nous et pour les générations futures en matière de changement de modèle, de transition énergétique et pour sortir d'urgence, parce qu'il y a urgence, des énergies fossiles. Merci à vous parce que en rassemblant tous ces acteurs, nous allons pouvoir sans doute échanger, marquer des points, créer du consensus sur un sujet qui devient de plus en plus difficile, même s'il y a des avancées, mais qui devient de plus en plus conflictuel aussi. En tant que maire de Paris, et je veux aussi saluer les réseaux de maires qui sont présents, le GCOM qui réunit plus de 12 000 maires à travers le monde et j'ai la chance d'en faire partie, le C40 qui réunit les 100 plus grandes métropoles mondiales et j'ai la chance aussi d'en faire partie. Nous sommes les acteurs qui sommes sur le terrain, comme nous disons souvent, nous les maires, à hauteur de regard, parfois on dit à hauteur de dispute ou d'engueulade, dans un bon français, de nos concitoyens. Et nous voyons depuis des années, et je suis maire depuis bientôt 10 ans, combien à la fois il est difficile de changer de modèle, de changer des habitudes, combien il y a des résistances, pas forcément dans la population et chez les citoyens, mais combien c'est nécessaire si nous voulons avoir un air pur, si nous voulons préserver la planète et la santé de nos concitoyens. Il y a quasiment 10 ans, se tenait à Paris la COP de Paris, la COP 21, qui a donné lieu à l'accord
Paris Agreement. And for the first time, there was a strong commitment to limit the rise of temperatures to 1.5 degrees. And this COP was organized, like many COPs, by organizing a very broad multi-stakeholder dialogue, but also with mayors, because at the time, in December 2015, I gathered 1,000 mayors at the town hall in Paris, and we also contributed to the Paris Agreement by bringing forth our solutions. Since I think that this agreement that was signed in Paris placed special responsibilities on me as Mayor of Paris. And this means that I had to be fully aligned with the objectives of the Paris Agreement and work towards achieving its objectives. And with many fellow mayors, we committed to deal with the most pressing problems. And the first problem was atmospheric pollution. And in particular, in a city like Paris, this is due to car traffic. And so this meant we had to deal with this challenge. I know how difficult it is. I experienced this firsthand. In my first months as mayor of Paris, I was threatened by lobbies who came to see me and to say, you have to stop, you must not talk about diesel anymore, stop talking about combustion engines, stop talking about the transition to electricity or hydrogen. And these lobbyists said, if you don't do this, we shall make sure that you lose the next elections. And I remember when a European leader came to see me in my office, there was a very high level of pollution on that day in Paris. And I had to take a decision, a bylaw, to make sure that children would not play in the playgrounds in their schools. And I told him, you're no doubt very powerful, but maybe one day you will be before the judges because you know you are poisoning people. And I prefer to be on the right side of history. And he implemented his threats. And like many mayors elsewhere in the world, and I'm thinking also of Sadi Khan in London, there was bashing, there were attacks against me in the media because the powerful companies also have a lot of leverage. They can use advertising campaigns in the media. There's a business model in the media that they can use, and often the media are not very much in favor of the green transition. So for me, the best way of going forward was to have allies, and my first allies are the citizens of Paris. And despite the fake news, despite the great difficulties to say why we had to overcome pollution and how we had to go about this, and despite all the fake news and disinformation, the citizens of Paris were with me on this, and in particular women, because very often women use public transportation, and young people also, because young people are very aware, of course, of the difficulty to build their future. And so we worked together. And I'd like to thank you all, because you too, as directors of this agency, were also very vocal in the public debate to bring sense to this public debate, to bring science at the forefront, as the scientists were also doing, the scientists of the IPCC, who for 40 years have been telling us what was going to happen, and their predictions 40 years ago have turned out to be true. So what's very difficult, in particular at this current juncture, is that if we don't take the time to carry out this transition, if we waste the time we have with oppositions that seek to slow down the transition, then we'll never be ready in time. And we'll have to act as a matter of urgency to change our model. And that is a problem. Before being mayor of Paris, I was a work inspector. And I'm very pleased to see here around the table the trade unions, because it's crucial. We need to take the time to carry out the transition. It doesn't mean we're going to postpone the time when we're going to adopt clean energy. We're going to postpone, for example, electric vehicles. No, it's to say if, for instance, if a car has a lifespan of 12 years in advanced countries, if those 12 years, during those 12 years, we're not going to bring the right conditions for the clean transition, and if we don't adopt measures to support the workers so that they can transition to clean jobs, then we're going to have a situation of conflict, we're going to see a backlash, but this pushback is because a number of people don't want to change our model. A number of people think that we have sufficient fossil resources that we can continue to exploit, and that it's a short-term gain that they can have, and that they don't really care what will happen in the medium term and in the longer term. Their idea is that they have immediate gains, they're interested in the immediate future, and in a world that could die, having a place in the sunshine right now often for some is the most important thing, because who cares about the future and who cares about future generations? We won't be around in any case to see them. And that is why we have pushback. And that is what is, to a certain extent, hindering the clean transition. And I think it's very important where we can act, where we do have leverage. So I'm talking about the decision makers, the unions, the international organizations, the European commissions. In all of these fora, we need to realize the responsibility that lays on our shoulders. We have to act. We need to make sure that we're leaving no one by the wayside, be it the workers of the sectors that are going to see big changes, or the ordinary citizens, in particular the most vulnerable, because technology, of course, could be at the service of those who can pay for the technology, leaving everybody else by the wayside. And right now, we are at this crucial juncture, and we have a major responsibility, I think. And I think that what we need to do is establish partnerships, multi-stakeholder partnerships. That's precisely what you're doing by organizing this meeting. I would like to give you an example To be efficient, I thought, let us try to align all the agendas, the global agendas, my own local agenda as a mayor of Paris, and let us try to make sure that if we align all the agendas, we can be more powerful and we can speed up on the green transition. And at the time in 2015, when I decided to apply so that Paris could host the Olympics and Paralympics, I saw that Thomas Barr at the International Olympic Committee had been working on his own agenda called 2020. This was an agenda that sought to have clean Olympic and Paralympic Games, games that would be fully aligned with the climate commitments. And so I suggested that the Paris Games would be totally aligned on the Paris Agreement. And that is what we have attempted to do, to make sure that this event can also help put forward this message of the need to change our model and to showcase with a very positive event, because sport is something that's very positive and there's a lot of energy in sport. So to be able to show that there is another way of organizing things. And I wanted to do this in very specific ways. How to move around Paris, how to eat, heating or cooling of buildings. We worked on the Olympic project, taking into account all of these factors. And for example, the Olympic village that has been built in the region of Paris, Greater Paris, that's the poorest region, Seine-Saint-Denis, just north of Paris. That's where we built the Olympic village. It was built with low carbon procedures. It was built using wind energy. We positioned the buildings to, for example, not have to use air conditioning or artificial cooling. And this was a project that we've been taking forward. The river, the Seine as well, because we looked at the air, the water, the food, the trees. But the water of the Seine is going to be cleaned. And here again, we've been working on water, because water is also an energy. It's a resource, a vital resource on our planet. And thanks to the Olympic and Paralympic Games, Paris will be able, and this will be one of the legacies of the Games, Paris will have a clean river where we'll be able to swim. And so around the 23rd of June, I invite you all to come for a dip in the Seine. If you know how to swim, there'll be no risk at all. So I decided to align all of these agendas because I think that every time there's an event that brings together the planet, where we can reconcile the global agenda with the local agendas and move in the right direction, I think that it's a very positive message we're sending. And since the unions are here, I'd like to say that, of course, the issue of the working conditions during the Olympic and Paralympic Games has been a major issue. And since the very beginning, at the outset, Bernard Thibault, who's has been one of the leaders of one of the major French unions, the CGT, and who was also one of the members of the ITUC in Geneva, he helped us develop a social charter so that we would be able to, during the Olympics and Paralympics, reduce the work accidents, and in particular, a death and injury during this big project. So we wanted to reconcile the environmental aspect and the labor aspect, because they go hand in hand. And you said this very well. If we think that rich people will be able to buy the solution and forget about everybody else, we won't manage. It will lead to conflict, it will lead to wars, and a humanity that really isn't a humanity at all. Finally, to conclude, I'd like to say that these international events are extremely important. It enables us to share, and I'd like to tell you my concern about COP29. What are we going to talk about in Baku? I won't say anything else because I don't want to create tension here, but what are we going to talk about in Baku? I won't be able to go personally because I'm persona non grata, I'm unwanted, and for my own security, I will not be able to go to Baku. But I think that in our work together, we need to be very open. There are lots of diplomats here around the table, and diplomacy, of course, means that we have to talk. We have to be open to others. We have to reach out to others and find solutions together. But I think that we also have to have a number of preconditions, because here we are undermining the future of the planet, a ransacking of the planet. And we're talking here about fossil fuel producers who also attacking their opponents in their own countries. Well, I think that we really need to have a number of red lines. And this isn't to raise difficulties. By explaining a problem, by describing a challenge, we will be able to find solutions together. And as mayor of Paris, who's very committed in the diplomacy of cities, very committed to climate diplomacy, I'll be by your side, Mr. Executive Director, and Paris will always be a city where we'll be able to carry out experiments, where we'll be able to showcase a number of things. And this is what we're going to try to do during the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And I'll also invite you to a meeting with all the mayors and many experts that we're organizing on the 24th of July, 2024, so 2 days before the opening ceremony. And we will, of course, invite you to the opening ceremony in order to share this great moment of solidarity, the first great moment of solidarity after the many crises we have undergone, and in particular the COVID crisis, so that we can share together, work together, and in particular bring trust so that our citizens can trust the solutions that must improve their human living conditions. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Hidalgo.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hidalgo.
Agree with me that the Madame Mayor gave very concrete examples of how in a city the clean energy transition can be pushed in a strong and in equitable way. So when I opened this meeting, I gave a few reasons why clean energy should be just and equitable, the economic reasons, social reasons. But Madam Mayor also mentioned one other aspect, which is important as well when we think of 10, 15, 20 years from now. To push the clean energy in an equitable way is also, it also means to be on the right side of the history. So I think this is very important that we are there. And we are very much looking forward to the Olympic Games, Madam Mayor. So you mentioned there is a lot of energy in sports, but I can assure you that there are a lot of sports in energy as well. So we see it. So thank you very much for that. And with this, I would like to move to a completely different part of the world, an emerging giant in Asia, which is Indonesia. So it's a great honor to introduce Minister Tarif of Indonesia. He's a great and close friend of the IEA, and he has shown a leadership in clean energy issues. And Indonesia was recently the president of G20, and I know that Mr. Minister and his team made everything possible that the deliberations related to clean energy was in an equitable form. So, Mr. Minister, thank you very much once again traveling to Paris, coming to IEA. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. Mayor of Paris, Madame Hidalgo, and then also Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I extend my warm greeting to all of you and express our highest appreciation on the global efforts to your continuous commitment to maintain energy security while ensuring the massive deployment of renewable to deliver a clean and just energy transition. Indonesia is an archipelagic country with more than 270 million of population. We have 16,000 islands, 6,000 are inhabitants, and then needs a great source of energy. Since our energy capita is considered low, it's about 5.8 barrel oil equivalent per capita. If we compare to a developed countries, which having a minimum of 17 barrel of oil equivalent per capita. Fossil energy dominated the fulfillment of our energy demand. We have 85% of fossil in our energy mix, mostly dominated by coal, because we have quite huge potential resource of coal. In addition, oil and gas also is a kind of heavy support to our industries, buildings, and transportation sector. This dependence translates into a significant circular economy across the entire value chain: agriculture, mining, processing industries, distribution, consumptions, which creates high numbers of workers who rely on fossil fuel industries. Indonesia commits to support global efforts to accelerate energy transition by setting emission reduction targets stated in our enhanced NDC between 32 to 43%. And due to the recent situation, we are now preparing new target. We hope that within end of this year, we can issue furthermore ambiguous target. To meet our target, we open to collaborate with every parties with mutual benefit, ensure secure return on investment. We are willing to cooperate in the industries which support the renewable energy technologies, but we have to also need to support green finance in order to push more green energy, which is also we have abundance source of this kind of energy in the countries. Accelerating the target sooner than 2060, which is our target to reach the net zero emission, means more effort to mobilize the resources. The clean energy transition must be able to deliver positive socio-economic impacts and benefiting the society by ensuring affordable energy for all through inclusive community engagement. To achieve the new energy target and maximize the social impact of clean energy transition to the communities, especially low and middle-income households, our government is implementing several programs right now to accelerate the transitions, such as we are now developing and improving our energy infrastructures throughout the countries. We already built almost 150,000 units of the gas converter to replace the diesel converter, provide for our fishermen who are living by fisheries, and especially who are living in the outer island remote area. We also currently develop our mineral processing sector to support the growing demand from EV industries. Currently, there are already factories producing the four-wheel electric vehicles, and then also we are pushing for the two wheels that we are also having a high population in the country, which consuming huge amount of fuel every day. We also provide couple 10,000 of portable batteries for the household living in remote areas, which is far from the electricity grid. We already developed about 1 million city gas networks for household, aiming for 10 million city gas network by 2030. So the city gas will replace currently the huge consumption of the LPGs, which is very costly. And then at the other side, we still have natural gas. And we think in the future, in case hydrogen is economic, this network also can be used to supply the green hydrogen into the household. Other program, we also provide communal biogas for clean cooking. We are also rely on the firewoods back in the 60s. But since we discover our oil source, by the year of 70, we use kerosene. And now we replace the kerosene with the LPG. And then the next coming, we are going to replace the LPG by gas. And then another thing is electricity. Hydrogen is very important, yeah, because people, they need fire for cooking. We also expect that in the future, carbon capture technology can be developed in the competitive way, yeah, because we can capture also our emission carbon after we produce clean syngas. We also built couple tens of micro hydro power plants and couple tens of pico hydro power plants, yeah, in the remote area to support our people. And currently we drive the conversion of our two wheels motorcycle to replace them by the batteries, because we have more than 120 million two-wheel motorcycle in the country, assuming that if they consume 1 liter of fuel, it equals to 600,000 barrel oil per day. About the shifting labor, many countries made a strong commitment to gradually reduce coal usage, which was a challenge for us as a significant coal producer. In Indonesia, there are about 300,000 people who are working in coal mining, with the total areas of 4 million hectares, and then 32,000 people working in the coal-fired power plant in demand for new job opportunities. Indonesia has implemented programs to ensure high-quality employment opportunities during the transition, such as we can utilize ex-mine land into another business sources, that we plan the biomass plantation, yeah, in the use of coal mine. We can install also solar power plant as well as farming, so that the community continues to benefit from the ex-mine sites. The next is encouraging communities around the coal-fired power plants to cultivate mangroves that are capable to absorb large amount of carbon. It's about 50 tons of CO2 per hectare per year. The implementation of carbon market will create financial opportunities for the community while lowering the emissions. We also distribute land certification to manage by local communities and to ensure that people who are lost the job in the future for the coal workers, they are assured they have such kind of an asset to support their life. We already set educating and training coal-fired power plant workers to improve their competency for the new and renewable energy technologies. We are mandating mining companies by the regulation to implement community development programs such as education entrepreneurial skills, and infrastructure development to support economically independent local communities. To conclude, the low-carbon transition to renewable energy requires collaborative approaches between government, industry, and civil society that are effective to leverage the uniqueness of its local circumstance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Mr. Minister, you are completely right. We know that especially in emerging and developing countries, moving from, for example, from coal to clean energy sources would require a lot of efforts. And we believe these efforts should be also supported by the advanced economies and international financial institutions to make this transition as smooth as possible. And what we are doing with the coal miners, with the coal industry, is a very good example for that. So, dear colleagues, last two speakers in this session are from trade unions. First of all, I would like to turn to my colleague Luc Triangle, who is the Secretary General of the International Trade Union Confederation. We have been working with the ITUC since a long time. I recently met Luc, I think, in January this year, and we discovered that we look at the energy issues from the same or similar lenses, and I am very happy to see you here, Luc, today. Looking forward to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, dear Executive Director, dear Fatih. It's good to see you all here. Thank you also for the hospitality, Madam the Mayor, and dear Minister, also for your introductory remarks. So the International Trade Union Confederation is a spokesperson of global labor in the world. So we organize indeed in 170 countries all the national confederations, trade union confederations. And for us, this topic, the clean energy transition, is one of the most important topics where we deal with today in our world of labor, because it's not only the clean energy transition a technological challenge, because we will need to find still a lot of new technology that can make this clean energy transitioning happening. But it's clear that it's not only a technological challenge, it's also a social challenge, and that needs to go hand in hand. You will not have a successful clean energy transition if it's also not at the same time a social transition that works well for everybody who is involved. So, and let me share with you a number of thoughts that we have as ITUC on this debate, and I promise that I will not take it long. So now Sunday, there is the International Workers' Memorial Day that we celebrate, and it's the International Day of Remembrance and Action for workers that are killed, disabled, injured, or made unwell by their work. And this year, the topic that we have put center is climate risks for workers, the escalating dangers posed by the climate crisis to workers globally. The climate crisis is no longer a distant threat. It's a present danger to workers around the globe. And it's imperative that we demand robust just transition policies and practices to protect our working people from the hazardous impacts of climate change. Our call to action is clear. We must integrate climate risk assessments and emergency preparedness into our occupational safety and health standards. The just transition proposals by the global trade union movement are an answer to the global carbon inequalities that we see. Poverty and vulnerability to climate hazards are correlated and mutually reinforce each other. It has been said times and times again, the countries, the communities, and the people that suffer most from the climate crisis are not the ones that caused the problem. Crucially, these countries and populations have also the lowest financial capacity to deal with the impacts and to finance the alternatives, such as investments in renewables. And it are the workers and their families in the poorest countries that are most affected by this climate injustice. In such an unequal world, without investment in job creation, we risk losing support for climate action. The climate crisis and human displacement are increasingly interconnected. Climate-related disasters trigger more than half of new reported displacements in 2022. Nearly 60% of refugees and internally displaced people live in countries that are among the most vulnerable to climate change. The majority of people forced to flee due to climate-related disasters move within their own countries. In 2022, disasters triggered a record of 32.6 million internal displacements, of which 98% were caused by weather-related hazards such as floods, storms, wildfires, and droughts. And securing social justice in the climate crisis is the backbone of our just transition proposals. And this is where the I2C and the IEA can join forces. The IEA has fully committed to the challenge of the Paris Agreement to keep the 1.5 Celsius goal in reach. The climate challenge is essentially an energy challenge that needs the accelerated adoption of clean energy technologies combined with the decarbonization of our economies. But it's not only technological. The IEA has developed their net zero scenarios, which point to many labor-related challenges. And we have already made substantial progress getting beyond the simple rhetoric that many more jobs will be created than jobs lost. As trade unions, we want to know when and where will these jobs be lost and created. And above all, what kind of jobs are we talking about? For this, we need industrial policies to be incorporated in the heart of climate energy policies. I continue to say that we don't question the macroeconomic numbers that are given, that clean energy transition will create more jobs than jobs will be lost. But we want to have a micro solution for each individual worker that is affected by this transition. We want to have a micro solution for every community, every region that is affected by this energy transition. And here I want to say a few words on our expectations for the work of the IEA. So we think that the IEA can continue to provide data and intelligence for governments and observers on the labor impact. Major progress has been made already by the IEA in this sense, for example, the recently World Energy Employment 2023 report. The IEA should also include the ILO acquis, and I'm also glad that the Deputy Director General of the ILO is among us here today, Celeste, because we have worked already on just transition together in the ILO last year, and the work also continues. Because we think that the ILO acquis on decent work and quality jobs should be included because it's a better understanding the link with fundamental labor rights. Protecting labor rights and investing in jobs are the best ways to implement people-centered policies, protecting labor rights and investing in jobs. The ILO guidelines for just transition were only last year confirmed by the big majority of countries, the same countries that are here sitting around the table today. And this is an important opportunity to link both processes and get out of the policy silos. And thirdly, the IEA has privileged access to governments. The IEA can bring the social dialogue dimension in concrete low-carbon energy transition policies and climate plans for countries. So most importantly, the new nationally determined contributions, the so-called NDCs, that countries have to present according to the Paris Agreement. So social dialogue should be part of that, agreements and those proposals. All NDCs that are prepared at this moment should have a strong just transition dimension backed up by quality social dialogue processes with the social partners. And finally, and probably most fundamental, we need to build democratic support for the ambitious energy and climate policies that are needed. Support for social and climate policies in the polling booths every 4 to 5 years in countries can only be built up by strong democratic structures also at the workplace. Workers need to be listened to because they play an important part in finding and delivering climate solutions. And they also are important in supporting the energy transition. And I've recently, dear colleagues, launched as I2C a global campaign for democracy. And it's also part of this For Democracy campaign. Real democracies deliver for working people, and that includes also delivering climate protection for workers. And the link is clear. If we don't include the social dimension in our clean energy transition, then more and more people will be left behind, and more people will find solutions in the populist or extremist talks that are sometimes then dominating a public debate when there are elections. And in that sense, working on a clean energy transition, working on people-centered policies is also a strong support in stronger democracies in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luc. This is another very good contribution to our debate, and I have also noted, and so did my colleagues, your suggestions for the IEA, including us, IEA, already trying to make sure that our discussions with the governments, with the energy industry, should have a social dimension. This is for sure, and we will push it forward. Just one thing I wanted to explain you, dear colleagues. We made every year World Energy Employment Report. How many people have new jobs for the clean energy? It's growing every year for solar, for batteries, for windmills, for electric cars. Now, number of people who have access to clean energy manufacturing and the workers are higher than the number of people who are losing jobs because of some of the energies are left behind. But they are not the same people. So you cannot subtract these two numbers. So we have to find a solution, as the Indonesian ministers said. The fossil fuel mining or refining or transportation or generating, when they are left behind, they are not used, they are replaced by the moderner, cleaner versions, we have to find a solution for the workers, for the families who earn their bread from those practices. So this is, I think, in my view, the nerve center of how we move forward, and I'm thankful to Luc that he underlined this issue. Dear colleagues, the last speaker of this session is coming from South Africa. We are honored to have President Losi, who is the Congress of South African Trade Unions, the largest trade union in Africa. Madam President, thank you very much for coming to IEA, and we are looking forward to hear your views as the largest trade union in Africa. And South Africa, we know a strong economy, wants to move forward, but there are many issues to be addressed. Looking forward to hear your views, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Program Director, who is also the IEA Director General, Executive Director, Her Excellency, the Mayor of Paris, Deputy Director of the ILO, leadership of labor, business, government, civil society, and NGOs. Indeed, it is an honor and privilege as the President of Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, to address you this morning as we engage on a very pertinent issue of the just energy transition. Workers across the globe are faced with a major shift to a low-carbon economy to address the destructions that are caused by climate change adversities. As organized labor continues to advocate for an inclusive and just transition, it is important that we ensure no worker is left behind in the transition and that workers form part of the transition discourse in informing policy, frameworks, and implementation plans. The just transition should be seen as an integrated transition where all sectors are able to appreciate the interconnectedness of issues pertaining to climate change and the just transition, and therefore solidifying it is to the benefit of workers. We must also concretize our key demands as organized labor, and this is noting the fast pace of the plans governments and employers are making in relation to the transition. The just transition in its envisaged form, envisioned form, for us should be to ensure decent job creation, eradication of poverty, and better positioning of workers and communities to participate in the low-carbon economy. The working class must emphasize the significance and importance of ensuring that there is adequate skills development through the upskilling, the reskilling, and of workers in the current workforce as well as the future of workers. For us, the transition should also address the issues of worker ownership and community empowerment. In addition to this, the just transition should introduce a structural change where access to resources is addressed, including combating energy poverty, affordable and reformed public transport system, advanced healthcare, access to land and housing through land reform and redistribution. Chair, the just transition is a topical issue which affects workers across all sectors. However, most immediately, it is in the mining sector. So, we must therefore continue advocating and empowering ourselves through continuous research and engagement so as to participate in the discourse and shape the national and international narrative that will best put workers and communities in a position to form part of policy and legislation making in relation to the just transition and future of the affected sectors currently. So workers must continue to call for a just and equitable transition that will ensure the workers who will transition will have sufficient support through jobs guarantees, through localization, through social protection measures, through the skilling and upskilling, as well as the universal basic income. So it is in the call for a just transition that issues of gender and youth are highlighted and are key in ensuring that all workers and communities are represented and secured in the new low-carbon economy. It is also important that we note the significance of the participation of trade unions in the just transition discourse. As the nature and future of work changes, the role of unions and our recruitment and organizing becomes critical. Allow me, Chair, to, as I conclude, to appreciate the workers, the trade unions, and communities that continue to forge against all odds to form part of the solution to the challenges that are presented by climate change and in ensuring that the just transition is inclusively fair and just across all sectors. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for this yet another excellent speech. One of the issues you mentioned, energy poverty. This is, and in Africa, this is, as I said, dear colleagues, at the IEA, we are a data-driven organization. We are not a political organization, data-driven organization. When we look at the data, there are so many injustices. I wanted to share with one of them with you, that I think, when it comes to Africa. Today, solar energy around the world is the cheapest source of electricity generation. Just cheap. leave aside the clean and so on. I was talking yesterday evening with the Minister of Chile, how cheap the solar is in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, and elsewhere. But in Africa, we have the highest amount of solar radiation, number one. Number two, in Africa today, unfortunately, every second person still doesn't have access to electricity, energy poverty, as Madam President mentioned. Yet, where is the injustice? The amount of electricity we produce in entire sub-Saharan Africa is less than solar electricity produced in Belgium. Think about the map. How big is the sub-Saharan Africa? And the size of, I have a great respect for Belgium, but the size of Belgium, think about this, and how much sun sub-Saharan Africa gets, how much sun Belgium gets. This is a big injustice. So therefore, I completely agree with you, Madam President. This is another dimension of having a social, equitable, clean energy transition. So, dear colleagues, this is the first part, opening part of our, I would say, many colleagues said, historical summit here, because you will see there will be a lot of inspiration giving to many other institutions. We hope so, and we'll follow ourselves. And for the next session, I would like to turn to another friend of the IEA, Sharan Burrow, who is going to chair the next session. Sharan, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, and we know you have to go, Mayor, so please feel free. Thank you, Fatih, and as he escorts Mayor Hildado out, let me say that you have heard just how serious Fatih Birol is about the social elements of justice and how they must underpin this transition. So, as the former General Secretary of the ITC, but most importantly for the minute, the IEA Energy Labour Co-Chair, then I must say that the IEA's voice is so important to working people and communities everywhere that we really appreciate this historic summit. I'm going to have to be very tough because, in fact, we are way over time, and I want to get as many people's voices in what is this incredibly important session. The Labor team met yesterday, and they know that if we don't embed both the processes, so the consultation, the joint planning, the agreements around what just transition measures look like, the capacity where it's relevant for co-sharing of benefits, all of those things, if they're not embedded and priced into the investments, then in fact we will fail, because once again we will see people marginalised. And Losi and I can tell you, we thought we got that right in the jet peas in South Africa, but what we found was that actually all the attention, the legislative guarantees and so on, was on the project of transition, and people were in fact marginalised. Thanks to Losi and others, they're getting all of that back on deck. But we've learned lessons everywhere. So embedding and pricing in the structures and the cost of transition is vital. And I'll just leave you with one figure. For our industry partners in the room, and indeed for governments and investors, Systemic says that if you don't include the consultative mechanisms that build trust to get the vital social licence to allow this to happen without opposition, but indeed with partnerships, then you can already risk, we are already seeing $100 billion of climate finance at risk every year. It's $100 billion today. If we continue the opposition, what is it next? And remember, opposition comes from fear. So this is all about, as Luke said, building trust in a democratic and inclusive future. So let me, in fact, welcome 4 keynote interventions, and I'm delighted that they're here. I do ask them to stick to the 5 minutes. There is a clock, I believe, on the screen. And And as I said, I apologise for being tough ahead of time. But Deputy Prime Minister Niane from the Ministry of Energy, Petroleum and Mines of Senegal, we are so delighted you're here with, in fact, my brother, Modi Giro, who is a renowned trade union partner of yours in Senegal. So, Minister, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, all, I would first like to greet and congratulate the IEA family. Senegal joined in September as an associate member, and this is a real milestone. It really shows how the IEA is opening up to countries of Africa that have a very major role to play for the future of energy in the world. So this was an important milestone, and it's a sign of the very close bilateral relations we started in 2019, and that covered different issues: energy security, statistics, the analysis of energy policies, energy efficiency, the development and promotion of renewable energy. And we can also welcome Mr. Giroux, who represents the workers of Senegal and who's here also. So the energy transition in Senegal, as we have always said, we've always said that we should not place our countries in a tricky situation where you have to choose between economic development and the reduction of pollution and the protection of the environment. Today, we have a number of challenges in terms of development, and we believe that we need a plan to gradually phase out fossil fuels. But for a country such as ours, that's in a situation of emergency, we need to have a plan that will make it possible to develop our economy and industrialize our economy. And regarding Senegal, where we have discovered oil and gas, we believe that gas can be used as a transition energy. A review of the IEA showed that if Africa developed its full gas potential over the next 30 years, our contribution would go from 1 to 1.5%. So this shows that it's not Africa that's going to be increasing greenhouse gases. Africa must continue to industrialize and develop, and Europe and the countries, the developed countries that have mostly contributed to pollution have got to reduce their carbon footprint. So this is the key message. The countries that historically have contributed to this situation need to act, and Africa needs to be able to develop and industrialize. And I think it's a question of balance. And we believe that the IEA can play a very key role in striking the right balance and establishing a partnership, because we need this partnership between the different countries. Also, we see that we have a complicated geopolitical context. We had to overcome the COVID pandemic. We have the war in Ukraine. And we believe that the transition is important. And access to funding is also a very major issue, in particular in the least developed countries or less developed countries such as ours. And in order to hold our ambitions and be able to transition towards key energy, we need a strong commitment of our international partners. And this is why we believe in the just and equitable transition, and we call on our partner states and the financial institutions to work together so that we can have more streamlined procedures on funding and make sure that we don't have an impact on our public debt. So to conclude, I'd like to say that we very much in favour of a transition. This transition has to improve the living conditions of all the communities and populations in Africa and in the developing countries, whilst contributing to the reduction of poverty and social and territorial inequality, whilst at the same time promoting formal jobs, training, in particular for women and young people, and also to contribute to the economic development of countries without increasing significantly carbon emissions, thanks to clean energy and also energy efficiency. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for the discipline around time. But thank you very much for such considered comments. And now I'd like to introduce Peggy Hessen-Volsik, who is indeed the President of the Norwegian Confederation of Trade Unions and a great activist with her government and industry in the context of the transition in Norway. Peggy.
Thank you, Sharan. Ministers and Dr. Birol. The Norwegian economy, society and welfare state is deeply fossil dependent today. In Norway today, approximately 200,000 working people out of a population of 5.5 million are directly dependent on fossil fuel production and their supply chains for their livelihoods. These industries make up a significant portion of the cornerstone companies in smaller local communities spanning whole regions of Norway. Moreover, 67% of our export income last year came from oil and gas exports alone. The challenge of decarbonizing our society and economy is not just a technical exercise, but it is a deeply personal challenge and transition for workers and their families, as well as a challenge to the ways in which we organize our society, our welfare state, and our economy. The question of how we can become less dependent on fossil fuels is crucial to enable us to transition while minimizing the negative impacts on working people, to prevent high levels of unemployment, and to reduce the risk of increasing inequalities as a result of the transition. This is crucial in order to build broad public support for ambitious climate and environmental policies. For my organization, LO Norway, part of the answer to these questions lies in using our structures and traditions of tripartite and bipartite social dialogue and collaboration according to the Nordic model to develop green industrial policies to facilitate the transition of the fossil-dependent industries of today. In 2021, the main organizations in the world of work in Norway, that is the Confederation for Norwegian Enterprises, NHO, and the Norwegian Trade Union Confederation, developed what we call the Common Energy and Industrial Policy Strategy. We identified 7 industrial opportunities in the renewable energy and green tech sectors that could build on the competitive advantage that we have established in the oil and gas sector over several decades. The hope and aim was that several of these industries over time could take over the role that oil and gas play today in our local communities, in our economy, and for our welfare states. In that way, we might be able to transition away from our fossil dependency. And the initiative received broad political support, and it has, to a significant extent, shaped the current national Norwegian green industrial policy strategy. So following up on this initiative, the trade unions and the Confederation of Norwegian Enterprise have also collaborated to identify the skills needed to realize these industrial policy strategies, and we have built tailor-made educational programs together with county municipalities to address significant skill gaps. So together we have developed concrete industrial strategies for hydrogen, for battery production, and we have also mapped the renewable energy needs for our industries to transition and to reduce emissions by 2030. Realizing these industrial policy strategies, though, have proved challenging, however. We have begun to see considerable public resistance to the expansion of onshore wind energy projects in the past few years, as dilemmas between climate policy and nature conservation policies emerge, and the early democratic processes leading up to the expansion were also insufficient. So this has contributed to slowing down the development of green tech industries and their supply chains, as we today experience insufficient renewable energy capacity. To build broad public support, the green transitions must be a just transition that addresses broader social concern. We have to create resilient communities through universal social protection provisions and ensure the right to lifelong learning and reskilling. The burdens, as well as the value creation resulting from the green transition, have to be divided fairly through fair taxation, collective bargaining agreements, and national negotiations between the social partners, that is, trade unions, employers, and governments. Participation and representation in democratic decision-making processes is the foundation of building societal trust. When designing policies for large-scale structural, economic, and societal transformations, policymakers must have in mind that their decisions will have direct consequences for millions of people and their livelihoods. So social dialogue with the social partners in the world of work is crucial to ensure a democratic, representative, and just transitions. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Now can I turn to Jacob Mbeli from the Director, he's the Director General from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy of South Africa.
Thank you, Session Chair, Executive Director of the IEA, Dr. Birol, Your Excellencies here today, representatives of labor and other social formations, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is an honor and privilege to be part of this important summit organized by the IEA. Let me first start by indicating that my minister, Honorable Minister Mantashe, would have loved to be part of this engagement. As many of you would know that he always advocates for a just and equitable energy transition that ensures that community livelihoods are not negatively impacted by the decisions we make around the energy transition. South Africa is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, and the country has committed to reducing its emissions. The energy sector, as the largest contributor to our emissions, is an area of focus, and this can be seen in our energy plans and in the implementation of our new generation capacity programs. Also in the Just Energy Transition Framework and the Just Energy Transition Implementation Plan, which focuses on the rollout of renewable energy, electric vehicles, and green hydrogen. The title of today's summit sums up how we believe we should all be thinking about what we commonly refer simply as just energy transitions. The title, People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions, communicate three things that we believe are important. The first one being that the transitions impact people and therefore no one must be left behind. The second one, that transitions are about moving energy systems from high carbon emitting sources to low carbon emitting sources, meaning that all clean forms of energy sources must be considered in us ensuring that we maintain energy security. Thirdly, that in line with the UNFCCC principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, there are multiple pathways to transition, and this will vary from country to country. Hence, we refer to transitions, not transition. Response to shifting labor dynamics also require that we design our interventions with an understanding that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. This is the case at a local and global level. The green transition, technological change, supply chain transformations, and changing consumer expectations are all providing key economic opportunities and new jobs across industries. In line with the thinking of the EIA that was outlined by the Executive Director in his opening remarks this morning, when he mentioned the study that is going to be undertaken on protecting vulnerable groups, we agree that there is a need for significant investment support, policy support, and well-coordinated partnerships between governments, business, labor, and civil society. In our endeavors to accelerate clean energy transmission, it is also important that international and regional policies and rules on trade and financing do not trump on this principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, as these practices have a potential of undermining local, people-centered clean energy transitions. South Africa has, over the years, registered the highest unemployment rate, with majority of those unemployed being youth. For South Africa, a people-centered clean energy transition is more than preserving current jobs, but also about creating additional decent jobs, economic opportunities, and ensuring equity. The review of the process that we followed to close one of our power stations confirmed that if the vision for people-centered clean energy transition is to be realized, energy transition projects must be designed with a broader scope that will provide new opportunities and create additional decent jobs in local areas, regions, and the value chain. Insofar as work is concerned around skills development, work is underway in South Africa to consolidate and better organize, scale up our interventions in line with the JET Energy Transition Implementation Plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have great pleasure in introducing another sister who's had a long history of supporting workers through transitions, and that is from the palm oil forests, if I recall rightly, Ellie, through to now, of course, energy transition. So Ellie Rosita Silaban is the president of the Confederation of All Indonesian Trade Unions.
Thank you, Sister Sharan, delegates and distinguished guests, especially Indonesia Minister of Energy and Minerals Resources, Bapak Arifin Tasrif. Selamat pagi, Pak. Transition towards net zero emission affect people disproportionately, but mostly vulnerable people, namely workers and communities. One of the failures of the mitigation and adaptation is because many countries view the economic transition as only the replacement of one industry with another, but the lack of social perspective prevents addressing the consequences for people. Seems everything being discussed, but it fails to capture in the detail how to actually translate the commitments made for inclusion. The ecological transition faces resistance because of fears about its social consequences. It is not seen as an opportunity for improving well-being and social justice, but rather as a threat to workers and local community. For instance, target toward zero emission in Indonesia, specifically in mining sector, our energy union mentioned. Until now, there has not been any information provided by the government or companies regarding energy transition in the sector, despite they were told there will be a phase out of the coal industry in 2030. So far, there is only talk but no meaningful engagement. I propose the government should oblige to provide a guidance, at least to answer this question. What kind of support for people affected, both workers and local community? What kind of social protection? What type of reskilling and training provided? How long the training? Type of benefits? Who is responsible for providing the training? Funding mechanism for the loss and damage facility and others need to be adopted in time of energy transition and a method for engagement. In my opinion, we need to pursue the clear mechanism to have social dialogue in energy transition to facilitate faster mitigation and adaptation. because so far this is one of the main challenges faced by unions in many countries. In Indonesia, unions have difficulty engaging the right ministerial institution to discuss the issues with. Due to the large number of ministries involved, we urgently need cross-ministerial coordination, planning, and agreement making. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eliane, for giving us back a little time. You've heard 4 distinguished speakers. I've heard the challenge, people being honest about the challenge of scale, the role of finance and its critical centrepiece. But I've also heard the importance of having serious industry policy agreed for green industrialisation that people can actually see, it's transparent, and they can trust. And that includes the opportunity, as well as the essential base of trust, to be about place-based development. So communities can actually feel and understand that they have a future and that they feel they have a stake in it. But I've also heard that, in fact, supply chains, or indeed the value chain, must be part and parcel of all of those planning elements as well, or you are leaving people out of the equation. The summary really is that the commitments are vital, the just energy transition principles, the inclusion of people, the financing and structural embeddedness of people-centred principles, but the implementation that actually gives the test to these is still, in fact, lacking in some areas, and that's why we're all here today, to change the face of that. And with the support of the IEA, I'm confident that we can move through it. I have a number of interventions, and here I'm going to ask you to have to be really, really brief. 3 minutes, 3 points, 3 minutes, we used to say. But these are very important interventions, because I know that Brian Motherway and the team are taking notes. So please put your ideas on the table. Celeste Drake, Deputy Director General of the International Labour Organisation. So important, Celeste, the partnership between the IEA and the ILO. So thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Excellencies around the table. I'll be really brief, and I just want to focus on the opportunities here and the opportunities that we need to do to work together to create the skills so that workers can get these good jobs. We know that renewable jobs are growing fast, and they're growing far faster than fossil fuel jobs, which remain flat. But one of several barriers hindering the energy transition is the lack of skilled workers. Lack of skills remains a major risk to the energy transition and to job creation. The energy sector needs higher skilled workers than most other industries. 36% of energy jobs are within the high skilled sector, as opposed to 27% in the broader economy. And job vacancy rates in renewables, a key indicator of labor shortages, remains high, particularly in building retrofit projects. Science, technology, and engineering degrees relevant to the energy sector are not rising fast enough to meet demand, and the gap is even greater for jobs that do not require any degrees. But the good news is that half of all workers in the fossil fuel sectors have the same skills that are in demand in the growing clean energy sectors. And they could switch into new roles with additional dedicated training, and much of this training can be done on the job and within firms. And the way to make that happen is to make sure that we have social dialogue and we bring workers, employers, and governments to the table to create skills, training, strategies, and make sure that those opportunities are available in an equitable manner across countries, across gender, across all vulnerable groups. And in conclusion, if we support workers in declining fossil fuel sectors and regions with reskilling and social protections, that can go hand in hand with just transition. At the last COP, when it appeared that world of work might be left out of the deliverables, we continued to tell the delegates, if there is no just transition for workers, there will be no orderly transition. And we were able to make that point, and we make that again here. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Celeste. Can I ask Diego Pardo, the Minister of Energy from Chile, and thank him very much for coming.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So I would like to put, if I may, an additional layer of complexity in this discussion. Mayor Hidalgo made a reference to the COP21 here in Paris, and in Chile we assumed the president of COP25, and when we assumed the presidency of COP25, we started working with the phase out of coal. At the time we have about 25 coal power plants. We are halfway there. And what we have learned, and this is what I would like to share with you today, is that probably the first half of this program was very different to the second half in which we are now. So the first half, the first dozen or so of our coal power plants were mainly used as a backup, and thus there were mainly a problem of direct employment. And in that way, they were owned by large, sophisticated firms, and we addressed this direct employment issue by asking and working with these large, sophisticated firms to retrain the workers and deploy them in different set of assets, renewable assets, and this was successful. We were able to do that. But when we move forward to the second half of this coal fleet, then we are talking about base load of the electricity system. And this comes with increasing importance in the economic activity of these towns. And then we start to dealing with problems of indirect employment. Not just retraining of direct workers, but also dealing with how do we face the lack of economic activity on these places. And this is an ongoing problem. We don't have like a clear solution for this. But what I want to highlight is the emphasis might not be only on the direct employment. This is a hard issue and requires a good set of policies. But as we start moving in the phase out of the fossil fuel industry and in our case in the coal fleet of generation of electricity, we are going to face increasingly a problem of indirect employment, and this should be addressed in a way in which the industry for industry approach that I have been hearing here, new industry that grows in replacement of the old industry that goes away, has to require some overlapping, both geographically and temporally. We need to be able to provide to these communities a new industrial activity in the same places or relatively in the same places and roughly at the same time in which the old industry goes away and the new industry comes in. This is increasingly difficult. I don't want to discourage this effort, but direct employment is just one part of the problem. Is a big issue. We need to tackle it with proper policies, but especially as we move forward in an effort to abate emissions, we're going to increasingly face problem of indirect employment, and this requires new set of policies that involve mainly industrial planning and industrial organization. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Another determined call for place-based development, and so I thank you for that. Plamen Dimitrov is in fact the president of the Bulgarian Confederation of Independent Trade Unions and has some scars from this transition despite their total commitment to indeed making it a just transition. Plamen, I can't see you, but wherever you are.
Thank you, Sharan. So I will try to use my 3 minutes to raise 3 points, as you said. And the first one is going to be the discrepancy, the gap between the green legislation and regulatory frameworks and the social and labor commitments, but also dimension of all this fundamental change. And this should be addressed in the national just transition plans And this is, as the previous speaker just said, the key issue. The key issue is to see where the new jobs are going to be created before closing the old jobs. Otherwise, we are in the middle of the nowhere, and the people are lost, and the slogan, "No one left behind," is just a slogan. So this is a key for us to have this legislation that simultaneously with the green requirements, CO2 or whatever, put in front of the governments and unions and businesses the same requirement, the social requirements and the new jobs requirements as the same in equal footing. Second one is future-proof technology transfer. Of course, many people spoke about that, but we really badly needed the both green and digital technologies to be transferred in a coal mine sectors and closing regions, coal mine closing regions, before being able to discuss this issue in deep. I don't think that this industrial policy and the new developments is going to happen. What I mean that we should give a priority of our competition, the technology export to the third countries, and should be able to do this, and also all these components and the supply chain should be made in those regions, in those countries that should be will be affected in all this green transition. And a third point, one more issue is really important one. Let's open a strategic issue about the critical minerals. We have been discussed yesterday, and critical minerals availability and control, and Dr. Burrow was asking us about some ideas what to do at IEA. I think the International Electricity Agency can do some research on this because it's really crucial about the supply chain development in countries that don't have critical minerals, but also have coal mines and have to close those coal mines and all these old industries. The third point that I want to raise is the finance. Of course, that's the issue that I'm going to say. The finance is not enough. Of course, it's crucial to have access to finance, but in our case, in Europe, we have our Just Transition Fund, we have Recovery and Resilience Facility, all this stuff are there, billions of euro. In our case, we have access to 1.2 billion of euro to close in the three coal regions, 20,000 direct jobs and another 50,000 indirect jobs. And after 2 years negotiating with the 6 consecutive governments because of political turmoil in my country, we end up with a Just Transition Plan approved by Brussels, but not approved by the social partners, neither local communities. So at the end of the day, it is not working. So that I'm saying the new jobs should be created in the same region as Minister from Chile just said, but also with a finance which is timely and well utilized by local businesses and social partners and unions at the same place. Thank you.
Thank you, Plumman. Can I now ask a very courageous business leader and indeed a friend of Labour, Maria Mendelus, who's the Chief Executive Officer of We Mean Business.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be at the IEA. My first job was in this building, so it's always great to come back. Thank you, Fatih. 3 points. So, well, business see an opportunity in the transition, and they know that it needs to be just and bring people along. But honestly, companies are starting their journey, and we are learning as we go. The Women Business Coalition created the Just Energy Transition Platform. There are plenty of examples there, but honestly, we are starting the journey. There are great leaders here. I see my friend from Inca in front of me, and she can give you plenty of examples. First point, systemic inequalities derived from climate is a big business risk. So business know that we need to tackle this. Business has an interest in bringing the staff along, reskilling, upskilling, because they need these people to run their business. So the dialogue with employers is fundamental. And thirdly, bringing communities along is also essential, and also bringing the supply chain. It gives business the license to operate. Let me conclude with a metaphor. My friend Fatih mentioned there is a lot of sports in the energy transition, And I can say that that's really the case. And so for business that are in this race, it's fundamental that they're well prepared, that they have a plan and they have targets, that they have the best players in the team, so the employees, and they have great supporters. This is the communities that cheer them. And this is a recipe to win. That said, there's always luck in these games, and sometimes luck doesn't come along. So thank you for inviting us. There are plenty of examples, but for allowing other people to speak, I encourage you to go to the Energy Transition Platform in our website to see them. Thank you.
Thank you. And indeed, I also recommend the platform. It's a really good set of lessons and ambitions there. Can I ask Ambassador Luca Sabatucci from Italy, please?
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, this coming Monday, the Italian G7 Minister meeting on energy and environment will start in Turin. And the IEA Executive Director, our friend Fatih Birol, will be a protagonist there. So Fatih, we count on you. The overall approach of a fair and inclusive transition, which also takes energy poverty and barriers to energy access for all, will indeed guide the Italian G7 presidency on environment, climate, and energy. We believe that universal access, elimination of energy poverty, and enhanced energy security are an integral part of the shift to clean energy. To be fully effective, policies to ensure a people-centered energy transition must take into account different national circumstances. In the Italian context, the focus is on supporting consumers and business, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, which are the heart of the business fabric of our economy. Both of them must be relieved of the potential risk of accelerating the clean transition through appropriate incentive mechanisms and policies to ensure that no one is left behind. Designing clean energy transition to minimize disruptions and maximize job opportunities means for us paying close attention to all tools that can make the new energy paradigm more accessible and inclusive. Concrete examples are collective self-consumption, energy communities, energy efficiency in buildings, district heating, agrivoltaics. These new energy models will save energy through the promotion of energy efficiency and simultaneously create new ways of producing and consuming energy. This involves new skills, abilities, and new job opportunities with direct benefit on workforce. Our National Recovery and Resilience Plan also provides an important boost. It allocates significant funds and incentivizes private investment and improves access to finance in the areas of renewable generation for self-consumption and sustainable transformation of the production process. Geothermal district heating can provide affordable energy to cities. In addition, retraining the fossil fuel-using workforce to learn geothermal energy skills contributes to a just transition for workers and their communities. Finally, the development of behavioral measures for efficient energy use has been experienced in Italy in the recent past with the success of measures taken to reduce natural gas consumption as a response to energy crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And now I'd like to ask Ludovic Voet, who is the Confederal Secretary of the European Trade Union Confederation. Ludovic.
Thank you, Sharan. Dear all, dear excellencies, I would like to build on a few things that were already said, rightly said. I think there are we have the climate objectives that are set. The problem is that the social mitigation of this climate objective is not yet on the table, not sufficiently. We see at EU level, for example, that there's only one country that has a comprehensive framework for just transition, and we feel that the climate objectives are, for the moment, socially unfit. So this links to what was already brought in the discussion, the need to have a phase-in of jobs at the same moment and at the same places where there's a phase-out of jobs. Because if a big company closes for 2 years before another company comes, as it was also said by the Minister of Chile, the indirect jobs in these regions will be affected. So SMEs won't survive, or restaurant or little companies will not survive in a context where the big company that is that was active there disappeared. So this brings the concrete element of the need for investment in the regions. All the question of the indirect job brings the discussion on investments. And we see that the clean energy investment also needs to triple. There's a lot of investment done, but we need to triple the clean energy investments by 2030 at a higher level. I think we need also to discuss of anticipation of change with trade unions through social dialogue will also be an asset for businesses, because they will be ready for the climate shocks. They will be ready with upskilled workforce. And this is where I want to bring the discussion also on. It's the working conditions of the workers. Attracting workers in the clean tech industry will also depend on the attractiveness of the jobs, not only on the skills of workers. There is a need to reskill workers, and there is a possibility for job-to-job transition from brown to green jobs between brackets. But the question of the concrete working conditions in the new jobs, in the green jobs, will be key. So the question of if they are union-friendly, these companies, if the quality of jobs is high, if the wages are acceptable, if the new health and safety risks are anticipated, if apprenticeship, if retraining, upskilling are put on the table, will be key to make sure that we can attract workers in these sectors. To conclude, I think we also need to bring the dimension of it's not only that we need to transfer workers from brown jobs to green jobs, we need also a better world of work for tomorrow. And for this, the dimension of gender is key, because only 16% of the energy workforce is made up of women, so, and often paid less than men. So we need also to have concrete policies that will also re-equalize and create the better world of work for tomorrow, reducing the barriers to reskilling and the barriers to inclusion in employment for the marginalized communities too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I actually ask Bethany Jones, who's the director of the Office of Energy Jobs in the Department of Energy in the US? Bethany.
Great, thank you. I just want to I want to thank you for hosting this dialogue. It's so important as we think about not just shared principles, but implementation of policies that are already adopted. And I want to talk about the U.S. experience over the last 3 years with what we have as historic climate policies, climate and clean energy policies, with the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And the way that we got these policies in the first place was a broad coalition that included labor unions that really helped design and shape the policies and put labor standards into the statutory language, so that as we're implementing them, we can lean on that statutory language where there's certain requirements that, that companies must meet if they want to access incentives and tax credits or other public dollars for implementation. But above and beyond the statutory requirements, we have been leaning into the things that we can do at the agency level, at the Department of Energy, on our discretionary funding and attaching conditions to the funding terms and conditions. So we have about $100 billion in grants, mostly to private sector companies that are looking to accelerate the clean energy transition, everything from battery supply chain projects to hydrogen, carbon capture, a wide range of clean energy projects. And then we have a few $100 billion in loan authority. And on all of that funding, we've designed a framework, we call it the Community Benefits Plan Framework, that at the time of application in the proposals, we require that companies seeking funds develop a community benefits plan. And this has 4 components. And basically, the idea is that they have to address these social considerations as an approach to mitigating the risks on their projects and ensuring broadly shared benefits and success. So what we require that they put in this plan is meaningful engagement with labor and community stakeholders, ideally leading to negotiated agreements between those community and labor stakeholders and the companies. We're asking them to think up front about the quality of jobs they're creating. Are they sufficient to attract the skilled workforce that they need, sufficient to retain that workforce? And what we define as job quality are above average wages and benefits, workplace health and safety, investments in worker education and training, and a free and fair chance for workers to join a union. What is the employer's commitment to support worker organizing and collective bargaining? We score based on this. We also ask them to consider access to jobs. We know that without intervention, as jobs get better, they tend to get more exclusionary. So we want them to think up front around how they're reducing barriers, systemic barriers, for certain workers to access quality jobs, how they're thinking about supporting the employment of displaced energy workers and folding that into their business plan and their practices. And then finally, how are they thinking about benefits accruing to energy communities and disadvantaged communities? So all of this is factored into the scoring of the proposals, and firms that have strong commitments score better, and they are more eligible for federal funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. And indeed, the power of procurement principles. And if there's an incentive, then people will look to see that they have to be responsible. We have a few speakers left, and I just ask you to be really strict on time. Can I ask the Deputy Minister of Spain, Sarah Agason, I'm not sure, Sarah, if I said that properly, who is indeed very welcome now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Excellencies, dear colleagues. I would like to start thanking the agency, especially Dr. Birol, Fatih, dear friend. I think it's very important to have this meeting today. I think all agree, not just because of the issue, because of all the people around this table are key for this fair and just transition that all of us, I know, that we want to support. Before I continue, I would like to express the best wishes for today's meeting from Teresa Rivera, Vice President and Minister. She can't attend these meetings because she's following Petersburg dialogue. And now I will switch to Spanish. Thank you very much. Me gustaría...
I would like to share with you, as Maria Mendelucci has said, in Spain, we have accelerated our energy transition, such a transition that needs to offer more and better opportunities for work. We need to incentivize social dialogue and consolidate social justice and gender equality. In Spain, we based our efforts on 4 pillars. In order to advance a just transition, we have created specific government structures. What do I mean by a specific? We have created an institute for, and I should underline, for just transitions, not leaving no one behind. And that's what we have been devoted the last few years. We have coordinated efforts. And secondly, this type of work requires governance, collaboration between governments, companies, private institutions, the civil society, but we need to have local communities being part of this effort. And this is what Spain has opted for. We have worked in tandem with each organization present. This is a transition that opens the door to many opportunities, as my colleague from South Africa pointed out. But first of all, we need to create jobs wherever those jobs are lost. And I would move on to the third main pillar that we have used in Spain, and I would like to share with you. We need to be prepared. Preparedness and planning would allow us to identify what are the jobs that would be created in the energy transition framework. And for that purpose, we have a plan that moves into 2030, 2050, based on an energy poverty plan. We have roadmaps to anticipate what will happen. And in that purpose, we have created a cross-cutting approach to just transition, and we have incorporated gender equality in all of our efforts. The fourth pillar, and I'm very aware of time, is skilling. By being prepared, we would be ready to skill our people right, and that would create more opportunities. All in all, energy transition needs to go hand in hand with economic development, and of course, we need to have coordinated efforts between industries and local communities. Thank you very much.
Deputy Minister, and can I ask now, in fact, David Arinze, who is DG7 Youth Constituency and well known to those in civil society for his advocacy. David.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. A lot of regards to IEA, led by His Excellency Dr. Fatih Birol and the IEA team. Thank you, and thank you to everyone here. Looking at this very important topic, you cannot talk about gender shifting labor dynamics when it comes to energy, without also talking about even the relevant levels of awareness and advocacy that needs to be undertaken to ensure that everyone speaks the same language, everyone understands the challenges that is in front of us, and what necessary actions that needs to be taken in order to get to the destination which we seek, which is a cleaner energy future for all. But we have also recognized that skilling and reskilling is very critical because on one hand, you have formal education, but also on the other hand, we have seen that technical, vocational, and skills is very important also to bridge that gap for those who may not even necessarily have formal education. Youth and women inclusion, we see the gaps that we do not have gender parity when it comes to also workforce representation, and we have to put a lot of effort towards bridging this gap. But this also presents a very huge opportunity for us as well. Achieving the SDGs, like we have seen based on the data, will provide over 380 million jobs. But this also has a multi-sectoral dimension because energy is an enabler, and it's not just in itself independent. And so this also provides a lot of opportunities for trade and investment. I will focus a bit also on youth entrepreneurship. And here, when it comes to youth entrepreneurship, we see that a major challenge as well is financing. And so we need to provide a lot of capacity building that engender investor readiness, especially for youth initiatives across every single structure, from our regions to our countries to our continents. Also, it's important that we recognize that this also presents an opportunity for inter-regional collaboration, and for us to be able to meaningfully take action, we need to all agree and come to a point where we understand that we cannot achieve this without a collaborative effort. We need everyone in the room, every country in the world, every single stakeholder, every country government, every single demographic, from children to youth to entrepreneurs to the indigenous people. Everyone needs to come together in order for us to be able to achieve this cleaner energy future that we seek. If it's going to be equitable, if it's going to be inclusive, if it's going to be one that recognizes the relevant impact that energy can make, we all must intentionally come together towards achieving this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think all of us recognise this is an intergenerational struggle, and indeed we need to walk hand in hand across the generations. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I would like to invite, indeed, the State Secretary, Minister of Labour, Social Affairs and Family from the Slovak Republic, Branislav Ondrus.
Madam Chair, dear distinguished colleagues, green transition in energy sector represents a huge challenge for Slovakia, mostly for two reasons. Most share of our economy represents industry production with high level of energy consumption, and second reason is that our energy mix strongly depends on oil and gas imported from Russia. Besides this, we implement process of full closing of coal mines. There are the main reasons why, if not exclusive, why social impact of green transition is significant. That's why at the beginning of the process, we modified formal rules for adoption of national strategies and law in order to make assessment of economic and social impacts obligatory part of any strategic and or legal document. Any such document is obligatory subject to public consultations with exclusive position of social partners in the process, as well as obligatory participation of academic and analysis experts. For example, last update of the National Energy and Climate Plan was adopted by the government after it was adopted, and that's what I want to stress, not just discussed, but adopted by the National Social and Economic Council, national tripartite body according to the ILO rules. Thus, we successfully made sure that labor impacts of the green transition will never be left behind, and assessment only is not enough to follow formal rules. If assessment discover any negative impact, there is formal obligation to propose mitigation measures with identification of responsible body and resources of financing thereof. That means our strategic approach covers adoption of particular, but what is much more important, always realistic and feasible action plan how to secure labor opportunities for workers touched by any green transition measure. This strategic approach is thus mirrored in strategic planning of utilization of national public funds or European funds, particularly resources of the European Social Fund, to mention just one example. That means that if we are speaking about necessity to mobilize financial resources for green transition, we in Slovakia always think not just about investment to technological transition, but also about investment to creation of new jobs or to reskilling or upskilling of workers, as well as to modernization of education system with particular accent on lifelong learning. And let me stress once again, this approach is not a question of current political will, because we made it the legal obligation. Inclusion of social partners as well as civil society representatives to the process of monitoring of implementation of this plan is also of vital importance. And finally, let me respond to your third question by 4 sentences. We can discuss what does it mean secure and high quality jobs. However, please take into consideration that it is impossible to upskill any worker. Simply not everyone is able to graduate at university, and therefore we need seriously assess any possibility to create not just high-skilled, but also mid and low-skilled jobs in sector of clean energy. I'm State Secretary for Labor and Social Affairs, so I'm not expert in energy sector. However, I'm pretty sure that it is possible, so strongly recommend to include to green transition strategies always to include identification of job opportunities for mid and low-skilled workers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And indeed, your commitment to making these requirements legal, I think, sits at the heart of confidence for people. I'm going to ask your indulgence for just a few minutes because we have 2 speakers left in this list, and indeed they're both from Brazil, and we know how important this year and next year is in Brazil. So Patricia Diane, Corporate Responsibility Specialist, Energy Transition and Sustainability Department from Petrobras in Brazil.
So good morning. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. So first, I would like to talk about the just transition understanding for Latin America. Last year, we had the opportunity to work with ARPEL, the Latin American and Caribbean Association of the Energy Companies, to start building a common understanding about just transition in our region. And we wrote together a white paper with a common positioning among ARPEL member companies on this topic. Our region has particular characteristics with gaps in access to energy, gaps in sustainable development objectives, with a growing population and increasing energy demand for prosperity. At the same time, the region has a high potential for clean energy production. So the second point about the Petrobras strategies. So Petrobras, as a large Brazilian energy company, is moving to diversify and to expand its low-carbon energy production, especially through wind, solar, and biomass sources, while decarbonizing its oil and gas operations. So this new cycle of projects that's beginning is an opportunity to put into practice the concept of just transition that we discussed in the context of Latin America. Petrobras' strategic plan for the next years brings the just transition as a value and a strategic driver in the search for a partnership for technological excellence that can reduce the cost of energy and for social responsibility programs that are integrated into projects. So just transition concepts were also considered in our corporate social responsibility policy, recently reviewed, and in our human rights action plan. So the third point, it's about just energy transition in practice from a corporate perspective. So on our daily basis, we want to, the way we evaluate and implement these new projects and the possible roads for the energy transition can be closely related to the just transition concepts, especially when we seek to look at the social outcomes of projects and initiatives, including quality jobs, local supply chain development, and low-carbon energy supply for the country in development, and also how these outcomes can benefit the indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals. So in this context, we are open to dialogues like today and to find the best way to measure and to deliver progress on the just transition trajectory.
Thank you very much. And I can only underscore how important it is in terms of security and confidence of communities that our oil and gas companies diversify, put the capex that we need into sustainable and renewable energy and jobs, because they have the technology, the capex, the infrastructure, and the skilled workforce. And I know and thank Fatih Birol for leading the IEA to set a 50% capex target by 2030. This is so important because this sector has lagged, and for workers, this is potentially a disaster if we don't get it right. But our last speaker, indeed, is Clarissa Lins, who's the trustee of the Brazilian Centre of International Relations. So, Clarissa, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for the invitation for being here. And as the last intervener, of course, I'll run the risk of being repetitive, so sorry for that. Coming back on 4 points. First of all, as we all know here, energy-related jobs are projected to grow from 60 to 110% by 2050, but with a very different profile, as the energy jobs related to conventional sources will decrease from more than 50% participation to roughly 15 to 30% of total. So this calls for a careful attention to the oil and gas and coal industry jobs. This is the first point. The second point that has been already mentioned several times here has to do with skills. We mentioned that we should reskill, of course, the fossil fuel workforce. But I would like to call attention for a second aspect that has not necessarily been mentioned, except for your last intervention, Madam Chair, that is the way to benefit from the unique expertise that is embedded in the oil and gas industry jobs, such as large-scale and complex project design and implementation and pre-salt projects, offshore projects in Brazil, for instance. The third aspect has to do with wages. Despite the overall employment expected gains that we mentioned here this morning, it is worth noting that wages in the conventional energies are higher from a range from 10 to 30% than in the renewable space, primarily due to a higher share of skilled labor, but also to a greater compensation for health and safety aspects, such as occupational hazards that are to be taken into consideration in the oil and gas industry, for instance. And finally, the fourth point is looking to the future. The energy transition has to be able to retain, but also to attract talents. And in this domain, the creation of quality jobs in existing competencies, R&D efforts to explore new skills can enhance the chances of a fair transition for energy workers. So to conclude, I would like to emphasize that developing new technologies through R&D efforts could also be a matter of attractiveness for new talents, and based on the sense of pride and belonging that they all have to share to build a strong narrative towards the energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And indeed, I think that's a brilliant summary to round out the session, actually. So thank you very much, Clarissa. I can just reiterate that even though we've focused a lot in this session on vulnerable workers and the need to transition in coal and oil and gas, we all know that we're involved in nothing short of a whole of economy industrial revolution to make this happen. So upstream and downstream processing and production, the services sector, the finance industry, the insurance industry, and the resilience of social protection and the care economy. All of these things will make it possible for us to make the transition. So I thank everybody for their participation in this first session. I apologise because I'd love you all to jump in, but I point out you have 3 sessions with structured focus. So those who haven't had a chance to make a point, then I'm sure you will have an opportunity. And I can only say what a great way to begin a commitment to a tripartite or a quadripartite commitment to work with the IEA on the social dimensions and the speed and scale of the energy revolution we need. Jane, I think you have some housekeeping, but again, let me thank you, Fatih, for indeed hosting this session and a brilliant opening start.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Dr. Birol. Thank you, everyone. And now it is time for a coffee and snack break. So we're going to ask everyone to come